The Galactic Scientific Council's invitation had seemed legitimate enough. That's what Dr. Sarah Chen kept telling herself as she was marched through corridors that looked more like the inside of a maximum security prison than a research facility. Her wrists ached from the energy restraints, and her throat was still sore from arguing with her captors for the past 3 hours. "I demand to speak with the council representative," she called out to the towering, crystalline beings escorting her. The Vertex, as they called themselves, didn't even turn their faceted heads to acknowledge her. Their translucent bodies pulsed with internal light that seemed to darken with annoyance. 6 months ago, Sarah had been celebrating her breakthrough in xenobiology, specifically in cross-species cellular adaptation. Her research had promised to revolutionize how different species could survive in foreign environments. The Galactic Scientific Council had taken notice, or so she thought. Now she was starting to suspect that invitation hadn't come from them at all. The corridor opened into a massive circular chamber filled with observation panels and monitoring equipment. In the center, a cylindrical containment field hummed with enough energy to power a small city. Sarah's escorts stopped before a control panel, their crystalline forms refracting the harsh lighting into rainbow patterns across the walls. Subject 2187, human female, xenobiologist, one of them announced, its voice resonating like wind through crystal caves. Beginning phase 1 of compatibility trials. Sarah's blood ran cold. Trials? What trials? "I'm a researcher, not a test subject." The Vertex nearest to her turned, its faceted face catching the light. "Precisely why you were chosen, Dr. Chen. Your work on cross-species adaptation made you the perfect candidate. We need to understand why your kind can do what should be biologically impossible." Before Sarah could respond, the energy restraints deactivated, and she was shoved through an opening in the containment field. The barrier sealed behind her with a crackle of energy, leaving her in what appeared to be a massive, circular arena. She wasn't alone. In the shadows of the chamber, something moved. Multiple somethings. The air itself seemed to vibrate with different atmospheric pressures, temperatures, and gravitational fields, all somehow coexisting in impossible harmony. "Welcome to Cell Block Z," a voice echoed from above. "You are now part of an ongoing experiment to understand humanity's unique adaptive capabilities. Your cellmates are species that should, by all known scientific principles, be unable to coexist in the same space. Yet here they are, and here you will join them." Sarah squinted into the darkness as shapes began to emerge. A creature that seemed to be made of living plasma, its form constantly shifting and crackling with energy. Another that appeared to be a sentient gas cloud contained within a field of magnetic force. And in the corner, a being that looked like it was carved from dark matter itself, bending light around its form. "This is insane," Sarah muttered, her scientific mind already racing to understand how these beings could exist in the same space without causing a catastrophic reaction. The atmospheric requirements alone should make this impossible? The plasma being spoke, its voice surprisingly melodious. "We've been here for what you'd call months, human. The Vertex want to know how we survive. More importantly, they want to know why humans can adapt to almost any environment they encounter." The dark matter being shifted closer, its voice a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "They believe humans have some biological secret, something that makes you more adaptable than any species they've encountered. They think you're dangerous." Sarah laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Dangerous? I'm a scientist, not a warrior?" The gas cloud swirled thoughtfully. "Yet your species has survived encounters that should have ended you. You've thrived in environments that should have killed you. You've formed alliances that should have been impossible." Sarah stood straighter, her mind already cataloging details, analyzing patterns, forming hypotheses. If she was going to be a test subject, she would run her own experiment right back at them. "Tell me," she said, addressing her impossible cellmates, "how would you like to show our hosts exactly why humans are classified as dangerous?" The plasma being crackled with what might have been laughter. "Now that, Dr. Chen, sounds like a hypothesis worth testing." Above them, unseen cameras recorded everything, while the Vertex analyzed data that would soon prove exactly why keeping a human in cell block Z was their gravest miscalculation. Dr. Sarachin had spent her career studying how different species adapt to hostile environments, but nothing had prepared her for this. As she moved carefully through the massive chamber, her mind raced to understand the impossible physics at play. The plasma being, who called itself Oryx, maintained a constant temperature of over 10,000 degrees Celsius, yet somehow Sarah could stand mere meters away without being vaporized. The Vertex called this a containment field. The dark matter entity, who had introduced itself as Void, explained. Its voice still seemed to come from everywhere at once. But it's more accurate to call it a reality bubble. Each of us exists in our own pocket of space-time, overlapping but never truly touching. Fascinating, Sarah murmured, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her fear. They found a way to layer multiple dimensional spaces within the same physical location. But the energy requirements must be astronomical. The gaseous being, who called itself Nexus, swirled in what might have been amusement. Now you begin to understand why they're so interested in humans. Your kind achieved space travel using primitive fusion reactors and basic ion drives. You survived first contact with species that should have annihilated you. You adapt to new environments faster than any known species. Sarah paced the chamber, her mind working overtime. They think we have some biological secret, some special adaptation that lets us survive impossible conditions. She stopped, turning to face her cellmates. But that's not it at all, is it? Oryx crackled with energy. What do you think it is, human? It's not about biology, Sarah said slowly, pieces falling into place. It's about perspective. Humans don't survive because we're physically superior. We survive because we refuse to accept limitations. When we encounter an impossible situation, we don't try to adapt to it. We figure out how to change the situation itself. The three beings seemed to consider this. Finally, Void spoke again. The Vertex have been studying us for months, trying to understand how we continue to exist in this shared space. They believe it's a property of the containment field. Sarah smiled, and there was something in that smile that made even these impossible beings pay attention. But what if it's not? What if the field isn't creating the stability? What if we are? She began to pace again, her excitement building. Think about it. A plasma being, a gas cloud, and a dark matter entity should create catastrophic reactions just by existing near each other. The Vertex think their field is preventing those reactions, but what if something else is happening? What if you've unconsciously learned to modulate your own existence to accommodate each other? Nexus's gaseous form condensed slightly. An interesting theory. But how would that help us? Because, Sarah said, her eyes gleaming, if you're the ones maintaining stability, not the field, then the Vertex's entire understanding of this containment system is wrong. And if their understanding is wrong, their security measures would be based on false assumptions. Oryx finished, crackling with excitement. Sarah nodded. Exactly. They're so focused on maintaining what they think is an artificial stability that they haven't considered the possibility of natural adaptation. And that's their mistake, the same mistake everyone makes about humans. They assume we need technology to survive impossible situations. But you don't, Void whispered. You create solutions where none should exist. The question is, Sarah said, looking at each of her cellmates in turn, are you willing to test my hypothesis? Because if I'm right, we might not need to break out of this cell at all. What do you mean? Nexus asked, its form swirling with curiosity. Sarah's smile widened. I mean, why break out when we could simply convince the cell that it doesn't exist? The Vertex understand the science of containment, but they don't understand the art of adaptation. They've created a perfect prison based on the laws of physics, but they've forgotten that humans have a habit of rewriting those laws. She walked to the edge of the chamber, placing her hand against the energy barrier. It hummed beneath her touch, complex fields of force maintaining the impossible balance of their shared existence. You said they want to understand humanity's secret, she continued. Well, here it is. We don't see barriers, we see challenges. We don't accept impossibilities, we see them as hypotheses waiting to be disproven. And right now, our hypothesis is simple. This cell isn't containing us. We're containing it. The three beings exchanged what might have been looks. Finally, Oryx spoke, its plasma form pulsing with anticipation. Tell us more, Dr. Chen. Tell us how humans turn impossibilities into opportunities. Sarah began to explain her plan, and as she spoke, the cameras above recorded everything, including the moment when the Vertex's greatest experiment began to transform into their worst nightmare. The first thing we need to understand, Sarah explained, drawing diagrams in the condensation her breath made on the energy barrier, is that the Vertex are thinking like scientists. They're focused on controlling variables, maintaining stability, and preventing chaos. That's exactly why they'll never see this coming. Oryx's plasma form pulsed with curiosity. Because humans don't think like scientists? Sarah laughed. Oh, we absolutely think like scientists. We're just not afraid to color outside the lines. Look at this barrier, for instance. They're using enormous amounts of energy to maintain separate reality bubbles for each of us. But what if we don't need separate bubbles at all? Explain, Void whispered, its dark matter form seeming to lean closer. You've all been here for months, right? Living in supposedly incompatible states of existence. The Vertex think their containment field is preventing you from interacting catastrophically. But I've been watching you move, studying how you interact with the space around you. You're not just existing in isolation, you're actively adapting to each other's presence. Nexus swirled thoughtfully. We've learned to coexist? More than that, Sarah said excitedly. You've learned to harmonize. Oryx, when Void moves closer to you, you automatically modulate your plasma temperature. Nexus, your gaseous form naturally flows around both of them, maintaining perfect atmospheric pressure. You're not just avoiding conflict, you're creating a new form of stable existence. And how does this help us escape? Oryx asked, its form crackling with anticipation. Sarah's eyes gleamed. Because the Vertex have built their entire security system around maintaining artificial separation. Their sensors are calibrated to detect and prevent any breakdown in the reality bubbles. But what if we could show them that the bubbles are unnecessary? You want to prove their fundamental assumptions wrong, Void realized, its voice carrying a note of admiration. Exactly. More than that, I want to use their own security system against them. They're so focused on preventing catastrophic interactions that they've never considered the possibility of beneficial ones. Sarah began pacing, her excitement building. Think about it. Their sensors are designed to detect and prevent any breakdown in the separation between our reality bubbles. If those sensors detect a potential breach, they'll automatically increase power to the containment field to prevent what they assume would be a catastrophic reaction. But if we're actually maintaining stability ourselves, Nexus began, then any power increase would be not just unnecessary, but potentially disruptive to the natural harmony we've established, Sarah finished. And here's the beautiful part. Their system will keep trying to fix what it sees as a problem, pumping more and more energy into the field. Until it overloads, Oryx crackled excitedly. Not quite, Sarah corrected. An overload would be too obvious, too easy to stop. No, we're going to do something much more elegant. We're going to make their system think it's succeeding while actually causing it to fail. She turned to each of her cellmates in turn. Void, you can manipulate gravity and space-time, right? And Nexus, you can control atmospheric pressure. Oryx, you're basically a living fusion reactor. Separately, you're fascinating specimens. Together, with the right coordination, we could create a self-sustaining reaction that mimics their containment field, Void realized. Better, Sarah grinned. We could create one that's more stable than their field. When their sensors detect this, they'll try to match what they think is their own system working perfectly. But the more they try to match our stability, the more they'll actually be destabilizing their own field, Nexus finished, its gaseous form swirling with excitement. And the best part? Their data will show everything working exactly as intended. By the time they realize what's happening, their entire containment system will have been effectively replaced by our own sustainable harmony. Oryx crackled thoughtfully. This plan, it's either brilliant or insane. Sarah's smile turned mischievous. Welcome to human science. Sometimes the best way to break rules is to prove they never really existed in the first place. Now, let's talk about precise timing and coordination. We'll need to start small, make them think their system is just working better than usual. Above them, the Vertex continued to monitor their supposedly secure containment field, unaware that their human subject wasn't trying to break out of their carefully constructed box. She was teaching her cellmates how to make the box irrelevant. The first phase of Sarah's plan began so subtly that even the Vertex's sophisticated monitoring systems didn't register it as anything unusual. Void began to pulse its gravitational field in a precise rhythm, like a cosmic heartbeat. Nexus synchronized its atmospheric pressure waves to match, while Oryx modulated its plasma temperature in perfect harmony. "Remember," Sarah whispered, though she knew the Vertex couldn't hear them through the containment field, "we're not fighting the system, we're dancing with it. Let it think it's in control." In the control room above, the crystalline forms of the Vertex scientists sparkled with excitement as they reviewed their readings. "Remarkable stability in cell block Z," one announced. "The containment field is operating at peak efficiency." Sarah suppressed a smile as she monitored her cellmates' coordination. The Vertex weren't wrong. The stability was remarkable. They just didn't understand its true source. "Now, Void," she directed. "Begin the gravitational fluctuations. Remember, just enough to make their system respond, not enough to trigger alarms." The dark matter entity pulsed, creating minute variations in the local spacetime fabric. The containment field automatically adjusted, pumping more energy into maintaining what it perceived as optimal conditions. "Perfect," Sarah murmured. "Nexus, your turn. Start expanding your gaseous form, but keep it subtle. Make them think their field is just doing its job exceptionally well." As Nexus began to expand, the atmospheric pressure in the cell shifted almost imperceptibly. The Vertex's systems responded exactly as Sarah had predicted, increasing power to compensate for what it interpreted as normal containment operations. "Fascinating," one of the Vertex scientists noted. "The human appears to be having a stabilizing effect on the other subjects. Perhaps this is the adaptation mechanism we've been searching for." If they only knew, Sarah thought. The real adaptation was happening right under their crystalline noses. "Oryx," she called softly. "Time for your part. Remember, we're not trying to overload their system, we're teaching it a new dance." The plasma being began to pulse with controlled bursts of energy, each one perfectly timed to coincide with Void's gravitational waves and Nexus's atmospheric fluctuations. To the Vertex's instruments, it would appear as though their containment field was simply working better than ever, automatically harmonizing three impossibly incompatible beings. In reality, Sarah and her cellmates were gradually replacing the artificial stability of the containment field with their own natural harmony. Each time the Vertex's system detected their perfectly synchronized energy patterns, it adjusted itself to match what it perceived as optimal conditions. Energy consumption in cell block Z has increased by 15%, another Vertex scientist reported. But stability metrics are at unprecedented levels. This could be a breakthrough in multidimensional containment technology. Sarah had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. They were so excited about their apparent success that they didn't realize they were watching their own system being slowly but surely subverted. "Now comes the tricky part," she told her cellmates. "We need to make them think their system is getting more efficient even as it actually begins to lose control. Void, start introducing microvariations in your gravitational field. Nexus, match those variations with your atmospheric pressure. Oryx, you're a conductor, keep the energy flow looking stable even as we begin to take over." The three beings moved in perfect synchronization, their combined efforts creating a symphony of controlled chaos that the Vertex's instruments interpreted as unprecedented containment efficiency. "Power consumption dropping by 3%, a Vertex announced proudly. "The system is achieving stability with less energy input. This is revolutionary." The crystalline beings were so focused on their readings that they failed to notice the subtle changes beginning to spread throughout their facility. The walls of cell block Z had begun to vibrate at a frequency just below their sensor's threshold. The energy conduits feeding power to the containment field were starting to pulse with an alien rhythm. "Did anyone else feel that?" one of the junior Vertex scientists asked, their crystalline form vibrating slightly. "Feel what?" their superior demanded. For a moment, it felt like reality shifted. The superior's faceted form sparkled dismissively. Impossible. Our containment systems are operating at peak efficiency. The readings are perfect. And that, Sarah thought as she watched another wave of perfectly synchronized energy flow through the cell, was exactly the problem with the vertex. They were so convinced of their own perfect understanding that they couldn't recognize when that perfection was being turned against them. Get ready, she whispered to her cellmates. Phase 1 is almost complete. Soon they'll be so busy congratulating themselves on their success that they won't realize we're about to rewrite their definition of what's possible. The facility's lights flickered almost imperceptibly as reality itself began to bend to a new rhythm, not one imposed by Vertex technology, but one born from the impossible harmony of four beings who had learned to dance with chaos itself. The first sign that something had gone fundamentally wrong with the Vertex's perfect system came not from their sophisticated monitoring equipment, but from the facility itself. The walls began to hum with a resonance that set the crystalline beings' forms vibrating uncomfortably. Status report, the chief scientist demanded, their faceted form refracting light in agitated patterns. All readings from cell block Z remain optimal, one of the technicians reported, their voice uncertain. In fact, they're better than optimal. The containment field is operating at 147% efficiency with only 62% power consumption. That's impossible, the chief scientist snapped. Check the calibration of the monitoring systems. Sarah watched through the observation panels as the Vertex scrambled to understand what was happening. She turned to her cellmates, who had maintained their perfect synchronization for hours now. Ready for the final movement of our symphony? Oryx pulsed with barely contained energy. The harmony is almost complete. They still think their field is containing us. When in reality, Nexus swirled excitedly. We've been containing them all along. Void, Sarah called softly. Time to show them what happens when you try to put walls around infinity. The dark matter entity pulsed, and for a brief moment, gravity itself seemed to forget which way was down. The Vertex scientists stumbled, their crystalline forms chiming in alarm as reality rippled around them. Something's wrong, a technician called out. The containment field, it's not just containing cell block Z anymore. It's expanding. Sarah smiled. Now Nexus. Show them the true meaning of pressure. The gaseous being expanded, not fighting against the containment field, but rather merging with it, transforming it from the inside out. The facility's atmosphere began to change, not violently, but with an inexorable certainty that no emergency system could counter. Atmospheric controls are not responding, another technician reported, panic making their crystalline form vibrate discordantly. The air itself, it's becoming part of the containment field. Impossible, the chief scientist insisted. The field is designed to separate to contain. It cannot merge with. Cannot. Sarah's voice carried clearly through systems that should have blocked all sound from the cell. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. The chief scientist's form rotated to face her, all facets focusing on the human who stood calmly in the midst of impossibility. What have you done? I haven't done anything, Sarah replied with a serene smile. I just helped my cellmates understand something you never could. The universe doesn't care about your rules. Reality isn't a set of laws to be enforced, it's a dance to be learned. Final movement, she called to her companions. Oryx, show them what true harmony looks like. The plasma being flared with a light that should have blinded everyone in the facility. Instead, it illuminated reality in a way the Vertex had never seen before. Every energy field, every containment barrier, every security system became visible, not as separate systems, but as parts of a single, grand symphony. The containment field, a technician whispered in awe. It's not failing. It's transforming. No, the chief scientist breathed, understanding finally dawning. The field isn't transforming. Reality is. They've taught the universe itself a new way to exist. Emergency alarms began to sound throughout the facility, but they seemed distant, irrelevant. The walls between possible and impossible had become as transparent as the barriers between Sarah and her cellmates. You wanted to understand humanity's greatest advantage, Sarah addressed the panicking Vertex. Well, here it is. We don't accept the boundaries you put around us. We don't try to fit into your boxes. We teach the boxes themselves how to become something new. The facility's structure groaned as reality continued to reshape itself around them. The Vertex's perfect prison was becoming something else entirely, not destroyed, but transformed into a place where their carefully maintained separations no longer held meaning. You should have studied your human history more carefully, Sarah continued, watching as their containment field merged completely with the harmony she and her cellmates had created. We've never been good at staying in our assigned spaces. We don't break rules, we transcend them. And now, she gestured around at the facility that was rapidly becoming something the Vertex had never imagined possible. Now you've given us the perfect opportunity to show you why the galaxy finds us so terrifying. It's not because we're powerful or aggressive or technologically advanced. The chief scientist's crystalline form vibrated with understanding and fear. It's because you make the impossible not just possible, but inevitable. Sarah nodded. Welcome to humanity's greatest secret. We don't adapt to the universe. We teach the universe to adapt to us. Around them, reality continued to dance to its new rhythm, and the Vertex finally understood why humans were classified as the most dangerous species in known space. Not for their weapons or their technology or their determination, but for their ability to make the fundamental laws of reality ask, why not? The aftermath of Cell Block Z's transformation spread through the facility like ripples in a cosmic pond. Where there had once been rigid boundaries between different states of existence, there were now flowing transitions. The Vertex's perfect prison had become a testament to possibility itself. Containment protocols have failed across all sectors, a technician reported, their crystalline form dulled with exhaustion after hours of failed attempts to restore their version of order. But there's no catastrophic reaction. The facility is stable. It's just different. The chief scientist stood before the observation panel, watching as Sarah and her cellmates moved freely through spaces that should have torn reality apart. Different, they repeated softly. Like humanity itself. Sarah approached the now permeable barrier between the cell and the control room, her cellmates moving with her in perfect harmony. Oryx's plasma form cast warm light through Nexus's swirling gases, while Void's dark matter presence bent both light and space in ways that should have been threatening, but instead created patterns of breathtaking beauty. You know what your real mistake was? Sarah asked the assembled Vertex scientists. It wasn't capturing me or putting me in with these remarkable beings. Your mistake was assuming that understanding something means controlling it. We sought to understand humanity's adaptive capabilities, the chief scientist responded. To learn how your species survives conditions that should destroy you. And in doing so, you proved you didn't understand us at all, Sarah said. Humans don't just survive impossible conditions, we reject the very concept of impossible. We see boundaries not as walls, but as horizons. We look at the fundamental laws of physics and ask, yes, but what if? The facility hummed around them, no longer fighting against the new patterns of reality but embracing them. Throughout the prison complex, other containment fields were adapting to the change, transforming from barriers into bridges. Your experiment succeeded, Sarah continued, just not in the way you expected. You wanted to understand how humans adapt to hostile environments. Instead, you've discovered why we're considered so dangerous. We don't just adapt to environments. We transform them. We take your carefully constructed impossibilities and turn them into new possibilities. Void shifted closer, its dark matter form somehow both ominous and comforting. They feared us as weapons, it observed. But they never understood that the real power lies not in destruction, but in transformation. Exactly, Sarah agreed. Look around you. We haven't destroyed your facility. We've helped it evolve. Every barrier you created to separate and contain has become a connection point, a bridge between different states of existence. Nexus swirled thoughtfully. The other prisoners, they're not escaping. They're learning, Oryx finished, its plasma form pulsing with excitement. Learning how to exist in ways their species never imagined possible. The chief scientist's crystalline form sparkled with sudden understanding. This is why the Galactic Council fears humanity so much. Not because you're violent or aggressive, but because Because we're catalysts, Sarah finished. We don't just change ourselves, we change everything around us. We take the impossible and make it routine. We look at boundaries and see opportunities. We transform prisons into proving grounds for new possibilities. Through the facility's windows, they could see ships arriving, not prison transport vessels or military cruisers, but diplomatic shuttles bearing the insignia of the Galactic Scientific Council. They're here to contain the situation, the chief scientist said. Sarah laughed. They're too late. You can't contain an idea, and that's what we've created here. Every being in this facility has learned something that can't be unlearned. The boundaries between possible and impossible are more flexible than anyone imagined. She turned to her cellmates, who had become so much more than fellow prisoners. Ready to show the council what real adaptation looks like? The response came not just from her immediate companions, but from throughout the transformed facility, a chorus of beings who had learned to exist in harmony with the supposedly impossible. The galaxy feared humans because we can survive anywhere, Sarah addressed the arriving council representatives through the facility's communications system. But that's not what makes us dangerous. What makes us dangerous is that we can teach anything to survive anywhere. We don't just adapt, we bring adaptation itself to everything we touch. As the council ships docked, Sarah stood with her impossible family, plasma, gas, dark matter, and human, existing in a harmony that defied every known law of physics. They had done more than escape a prison. They had proven why humanity would always be both the galaxy's greatest fear and its greatest hope, because wherever humans went, the impossible learned how to become possible. And that, more than any weapon or technology, was why the galaxy would never be quite the same.